Good morning, everyone. My name is Magnus Christiansson. I come from the Swedish Defense University, and I will be moderating this outreach seminar here at the Technology and Security Forum. And today we have the privilege of having Assistant Secretary of Defense, Stephen Welby here. He is, in that position, he's also the principal advisor to the Secretary of Defense for research and development issues. And he's also served as Deputy Assistant Secretary for Defense previously. So it's a great privilege to have you here, and we're all looking forward to what you have to say, especially regarding the U.S. Defense Innovation Initiative. With us also, we have Rear Admiral Jonas Hagren over there from the Swedish Armed Forces, and he's going to give a few comments on these issues, and it's going to be interesting to hear what you have to say from a Swedish perspective. But before I give the floor to our honored guest for a key speech, I would like to give the floor to the U.S. Ambassador to Stockholm, Azita Rai, who's going to give us a few words of introduction. So, ma'am, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. Good morning and welcome. I'm honored to be here. Welcome, Secretary Welby. We've been anticipating your visit with great excitement. And this all began when Deputy Secretary of Defense Bob Work was here in Sweden, and we talked about our very strong collaboration on security issues, but in particular also now, given the strength that U.S. and Sweden have in innovation, this is an area that we're very much focused on enhancing, and no area more interesting and important than our defense cooperation as it comes to innovation. There's a lot there that can be explored, and I would love to. We would love to work with Sweden on this, and I think we have already. We're off to a great start. So, with that, Secretary Welby, I think everyone is eager to hear from you on this, and welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Ambassador, and thank you all for your kind words and attention this morning. I have a few charts I'd like to show, maybe just to help frame the discussion a little bit, and if I can figure out how to operate this. Again, it's a terrific opportunity to be here with you all today. The Deputy Secretary of Defense was here back in April, and immediately on his return to the United States, he grabbed me by the collar and said, "You need to get over and have a conversation about the mutual opportunities we have to think about innovation together." And the discussion about innovation in our defense enterprise has been significant ongoing through my entire period in the department, but certainly has accelerated over the last 2.5 years, particularly under Secretary Carter's leadership as the Secretary of Defense. He's made innovation in materiel, in organization, and in our personnel practices a centerpiece of his time in the department. When Dr. Carter was sworn in, we had a receiving line afterwards. Folks came up to shake his hand and have a photo taken. When I reached the front of the line, I put my hand out to shake his hand, and instead Ash put his finger in my chest and said, "You only get a PhD physicist as Secretary of Defense once every 40 years. Make the most of it." And so we've been doing our best from a technological perspective to take advantage of having a leadership that has an enormous understanding of technology, enormous interest in technological innovation, and to help us shape the technology options we have for the department. I serve as the Assistant Secretary of Defense for Research and Engineering. It's in that role, I oversee our technology efforts across the department. I'm still playing with the computer here. I'm not right in the right application. But I oversee our developments in science and technology, our workforce in engineering that helps to bring capability into realization. I work with our folks who manage our large-scale test enterprise. Is that one that's up, if we can bring it up? Fantastic. And day to day, I manage the portfolio of technologies that we're invested in both domestically and internationally. We talked a little bit earlier today in a previous session about the long-term trends shaping our defense engagement here in Europe and around the world. And it's those long-term trends that we're trying to address with our innovation agenda in the United States. Fundamental changes in demographics, in economic perspectives, in technological opportunities, the globalization of technical talent and technical opportunity. These are long-term shapers that will impact our national capabilities and our ability to cooperate with partners over the long term. It's an opportunity for us to rethink the way we deliver capability, how we connect to innovative commercial enterprises, how we're engaging with academia, to accelerate the delivery of products that can make a difference to our warfighters. I mentioned Dr. Carter's support for these initiatives. He's made this a major theme of everything we've been doing. Our U.S. defense innovation strategy has really 4 pillars. The first and most important one is our people, to change the way that we recruit, retain, train, and develop both our uniformed and civilian leadership. Dr. Carter regularly talks about trying to increase the porosity of the department, breaking holes in our 5-sided building in the Pentagon and inviting folks to come collaborate with us. Folks from sectors that don't normally think of defense as a natural affinity. To increase our opportunity to engage with international partners, to increase our ability to engage with academic partners globally, and to think about new ways to deliver defense capability. We have, over the last year, reduced a number of barriers that have prevented folks from being able to participate in the defense enterprise, broken down, for example, all the limits that have constrained women's participation in military roles across the department. We've reduced a number of barriers, other barriers that have prevented folks from participating fully in the roles in the department. And today we're now thinking about ways that folks can engage with the Department of Defense in ways that have not traditionally been available to them. Not signing up for a 20 or 30-year career, but instead coming to work for us for a year or two in unique ways, coming into the department, contributing, and then going back into the private sector and expanding their skill set in new ways, and perhaps coming back later in their careers to be able to offer opportunities again. We have a major focus on trying to open ourselves to think more freely, to break down the barriers of the very rigid organizations that we operate under, to allow us to really take risk in ways we have not in the past, to explore opportunities that for collaboration, for new structures, for new mechanisms of innovation that traditionally our conservative nature and risk adversity have prevented us from exploiting. And then finally, this notion of a focus on collaboration. We were just talking a few moments ago about our Open Laboratories initiative. We're literally tearing down fences that have separated our defense facilities from larger communities. We're inviting folks to come live with us on our defense campuses, to work with us on a day-to-day basis, regardless of national origin, our security clearances, or all the things that have prevented folks from working in the past. We're trying to value collaboration and exchange to a much greater degree because we see that as an accelerator for technological innovation. Sweden has been a great partner in all of our technology outreach efforts. Today, we have over $26 million of ongoing technology exchange agreements in the research and development space with Sweden. I list some of them up here, but there are over 20 information exchange programs and a dozen memorandums of understanding in place between the U.S. enterprise and Swedish organizations. And the list of planned and ongoing engagements is long, And I'm hoping that over the next a month or two, we'll be able to expand the scope of those arrangements significantly. One that I'm particularly interested in is our opportunity to increase the exchange of personnel between the U.S. enterprise and the Swedish MOD and Swedish research institutions. Those kind of mechanisms, the ability to get direct face-to-face exchanges, I think is one of the most valuable ways that we can collaborate and bring our efforts into alignment. As we think about planning for innovation, how we think about reorganizing the department to face the challenges we're going to see in the 21st century, we've been reflecting back on previous models that have enabled us to have sustained technological superiority against potential adversaries, and have provided the U.S. and its partners and allies with significant conventional deterrence to enforce international norms, to be able to secure peace, and to be able to succeed in conflict if necessary. Many of those capabilities that we've enjoyed for the last 40 years are now challenged. They're challenged by the increasing globalization of technology, the global access to talent, the increased availability of advanced technical capabilities around the world in ways that they have not been in the past. The last major kind of revolution in military technology occurred in the 70s and 80s with the introduction of advanced precision weapons, global positioning, advanced computation, highly networked systems, and advanced RF technology. All those capabilities are now available in everyone's pockets in this room, integrated to the cell phones that we all carry with us every day. Those unique military technologies have now leaked into the civilian sector and are available to actors whose interests may not align with our own. Today we're rethinking about what the technological advantages that will allow us to sustain our military capabilities for the next several decades will be. And the source of that advantage will be different than it was in the 70s and 80s. In the 70s and 80s, those technologies of stealth, of GPS, of small inertial devices, and so on, all really arose from investments that were made within the defense enterprise itself, both here in Europe, in the United States, and elsewhere. Those unique defense investments are unlikely to be the source of sustained advantage in the future. Increasingly, we're looking to the commercial sector for advanced technologies that can be then translated into the defense space. That's going to require us to be much more open to talent, to new sources of opportunity, and to new models of doing business. And I think that's a great opportunity for us. In the 70s and 80s, the fundamental revolution that occurred in technology was born from advanced planning. Back in 1973, then Secretary Brown in the United States asked academic, industrial, and government researchers to think 40 years into the future, and asked them to imagine what sort of technologies might be available to shape conventional forces in that time period. And they conducted what was called the Long Range Research and Development Planning Program back in 1973. That effort looked at the technologies of the day. At the time, the U.S. Navy was flying the transit system, a single satellite to enable geolocation of ships at sea, and imagined a network of those satellites that could provide precision anywhere in the world, the capability we now know as GPS. They looked at the experiments going on with packet radio and imagined how those kind of concepts might be applied on large-scale terrestrial networks, the kind of capability that became the internet. They looked at what was happening on inertial devices, imagined fiber optic, gyroscopic technology, and others, and imagined how that might influence future weapons. And so by thinking about the current state of the art, by being able to project forward technologically, and by asking questions about how those might be adapted to military systems, it helped shape a decade of investments that resulted in the material that was born in the Reagan defense buildup of the 80s in the United States, that propagated to allies and partners, and really has been the toolkit that the West has used to modernize our forces now for 40 years. Over the last 24 months, the United States has been embarked on a program that echoes the activities of the 70s. For Undersecretary work, I led an effort over the last 18 months to look at what a long-range research development planning program for the 21st century might look like. We invited industry to help us think about emerging technologies and emerging technological applications. We had an opportunity to engage with the popular press, to invite citizens to crowdsource and collaborate with us to identify ideas that might help us think about the future in new ways. We engaged international partners through bilateral and through the Embassy Network in Washington to invite industrial participation from abroad to help inform perspectives on the future. Through this, we received over 500 white papers in this process, and we collected a team of the smartest folks across the department, across Department of State, across the Department of Homeland Security in the United States. We bunkered them for 6 months while they thought about the future, and we've really been trying to understand opportunities in the 2030 timeframe about how we might address the emerging world challenges. That was reflected this February in our 2017 budget proposal, which Secretary Carter rolled out to Congress, that included $18 billion in reprioritization of defense spending over our fiscal program, aligned around technologies that were identified through what we call now the third offset strategy, the concepts that emerged from this development plan. When we think about a third offset strategy, it's not a document that sits in the drawer like a traditional plan or strategic document might. It's really an ambitional approach to allow us to think about what the future might be and how we might experiment and develop concepts that would provide capability options for future investment. They're a hedge, if you will, against future threats. And in the budget rollout in last February, Secretary Carter identified 5 specific concerns that the United States would plan against as part of this activity. Emerging capabilities in China that challenge U.S. capabilities, a focus on Russia and challenges here in Europe, a focus on Iranian capabilities, focus on North Korea, and of course the continued focus on the challenge of global counterterrorism. Around that framework, we've been looking at technologies that might offer significant military advantage in the future. Capabilities like autonomy and artificial intelligence, opportunities to be able to reach out at longer range and be able to be effective in communication-denied environments. Thinking about ways to rethink what mass looks like on a future battlefield, disaggregating systems and being able to coordinate behaviors in new ways. Thinking about ways to operate with much smaller forces, to be able to react in a much more agile and flexible way, using technology to advantage in new models. One piece that has received a lot of attention, both at in the press, has been the significant focus on artificial intelligence and autonomy as an enabler for the future. Today we see advanced computing capabilities reshaping industry in interesting ways. We see the emergence of autonomous ground vehicles appearing on the streets of our cities at home. We're now seeing unmanned air systems now beginning to see significant commercial potential both here in Europe and the United States. And we see that the extension of those capabilities, many of which were born from military investments, continue to shape opportunities in the future. Opportunities to think about how new systems that are able to learn and adapt on the fly might enable more flexible military operations. Ways that humans and autonomous systems might be able to collaborate in ways that might allow us to reduce the risk to forces, to allow machines perhaps to be the first to make contact. New ways to think about allowing decision systems to accelerate decision making, and perhaps to allow advanced systems to allow us to operate in environments where networks are RF communications might be degraded by electronic warfare or other means. There's an enormous set of enabling capabilities, and this has been a real focus of attention from Deputy Secretary Work and from across the U.S. defense enterprise, but it's not the only area in which we're engaged. It's one where, but it's a good area because it exposes many of the challenges we're going to face in adopting new technologies here in the 21st century. This is an area where the lead for many of these technologies is in the commercial sector. It's in academia. Many of these capabilities and technologies in deep neural nets, in advanced sensing, in some of the earliest autonomous vehicle work that I was engaged in during my period at DARPA, emerged from the defense sector, has now found its way into commercial use, is accelerating at a remarkable pace, and we're going to need to position ourselves ahead of that bow wave of commercial exploitation to think about how we might refine and leverage it for military application. And that suggests we need to think differently about the way we deploy our capabilities to take advantage of fast-paced technological development. We have a series of framework documents in the United States around our research and engineering strategy, and I invite you to look at those at some point in time. But quite frankly, these documents are almost obsolete by the time we publish them. Our strategy is evolving continuously. It needs to be flexible and reactive to opportunity, and it's really evolving today at the pace of technological opportunity. As we think about that strategy, though, the key things that we're focused on are the broad tenets that direct all of our research and engineering investments. The first is to ensure that we maintain our core capacity, the fundamental military technologies that are at the base of the way that we deliver capability to the warfighter. Those things that evolve at perhaps a slower pace, but for which no other organization will do the basic work required to maintain capacity and capability. The second is a relatively new addition, and it's a focus on cost as a central tenet of everything we do. When we talk about cost, though, we're not simply thinking about how I can save a few pennies by substituting a material for an existing material or perhaps tweaking a manufacturing process. We're trying to think about how we deliver cost improvements by fundamentally disrupting the way we do business today. How can I move away from large integrated platforms to simpler capabilities? What can I move into the software space? What can I think about in terms of reducing the need for large quantities of people to support our complex systems? And then finally, the most interesting and often most important area is our focus on technological surprise. We have a system in the United States that's really focused on ensuring that we create technology disruption. Organizations like DARPA, like our laboratories, like many of our commercial outreach activities, are focused on finding those things that are on the frontier of technology that might offer orders of magnitude change in capability. We're trying to make sure that we are creating technological surprise for potential adversaries, and that our soldiers, sailors, and airmen never are surprised by technology on future battlefields. Our current budget request for the fiscal year that started on October 1st is about $12.5 billion in the United States for our science and technology investments across our defense enterprise. That's broken into three areas, about $2 billion in basic research, $4.8 billion in applied research, and then $5.8 billion in advanced capability development, the predecessor to products. And so against kind of a commercial life cycle, much of this is engagement with universities and with basic research laboratories, work going on concepts and devices, and then making its way into real military systems. My office oversees the portfolio of investments here that are executed by largely the three services and DARPA in roughly equal measure across the three. With my office, we directly oversee some of these other investments that are specialized, investments in environmental remediation, investments in medical support, and some of the cross-cutting work that we leverage kind of across the enterprise. And I think often surprising to folks I talk to is 2/3 of that investment goes out of the department. It goes into industrial organizations. It supports academic research around the world. It's being executed by a very large fraction by small and medium enterprises. It's a very diverse mix of actors that help us execute our mission. When we think about the portfolio of work that we do, I organize it around these 17 areas, and I'm not going to try and talk to the 17 topics, but roughly 90% of our applied research spend kind of aligns to these 17 topic areas. We're currently looking at revisiting these areas, and there may be opportunity over the next few months to begin to break some of these areas up. For example, the area of biomedical is one where biotechnology is moving at an incredible rate, and where we may start to think about separating some of our advanced capabilities in biotechnology from our more traditional work in medical research. But this mix of areas reflects kind of three domains. Some areas which are very mission-oriented and functionally aligned. Our work on countering IEDs, of course, driven by demand from the current fight. Our focus on countering weapons of mass destruction being a continuing challenge. And then going all the way down to very fundamental areas like the future of space technology, our work on the frontiers of advanced electronics. We try to capture that full range of from core technologies through the very applied into these 17 areas. I manage these communities in a bottom-up fashion. I don't have all of the world's expertise in my office. Instead, we utilize distributed organization peer review from across the large enterprise to help us understand where opportunity is, to identify where we have work that may be overlapping or duplicative, maybe now aging out to the point where we can discontinue it. And we're continuously assessing our portfolio for opportunities to reinvest in new frontiers. We now start to think about our investment as really an ecosystem, one that includes at its core our DoD unique laboratories, engineering and warfare centers, but really serving as a connective tissue around a larger network of global partners in industry, in academia, non-traditional organizations that would never have thought of national security as part of their portfolio. Organizations like DARPA are the not-profit sector. Trying to bring the best ideas from all these organizations, connect them together, and to connect them to the problems that confront us in the national security domain. This chart, which you probably can't see from the back, is a map of our current operating locations, both in the United States and abroad. And I just wanted to put this up to point out that while we do maintain a large number of facilities, they're designed around specific goals. We have three large capstone laboratories in the United States: our Army, Navy, and Air Force research labs. Two located in the Washington metropolitan area, one located in Dayton, Ohio. But the other 70 facilities we operate around the country are specialized laboratories focused on rocket engine design, on propulsion testing, on biomedical capabilities at our facilities in Texas, on soldier systems in our facilities in Massachusetts, areas that are particularly focused by domain and which are located in and around academic and industrial nexus areas that allow us to take advantage of the best and brightest in those areas. Today, again, we're trying to break down the barriers between those external organizations and our laboratories to increase the flow of personnel and ideas in and out of our enterprise to help us accelerate innovation. Most importantly, I think today, we've been growing our global engagement as well. Today, just this week, Secretary Carter was in South America and signed a new set of research and development agreements in Chile. We maintain a research center in Santiago, our European center in London, our Asian center in Tokyo, where we have brought together defense researchers with the goal of establishing connections to regional industry and academia to increase that flow of ideas and partnerships with the United States. all that research and technology is interesting, but it's irrelevant unless we can translate it into capability. And we translate the technology into capability through our acquisition process. Traditionally, the way that the United States procures systems has been characterized as slow, complicated, and unwieldy. And when Secretary Carter was Undersecretary for Acquisition Technology and Logistics, he challenged us to rethink those processes. And so for the last 6 years, we've been on a journey of continuous improvement in the way we buy to try and ensure that we're focused continuously on speed, on time to market, on connecting our laboratories to the field in new ways. Over the last 6 years, we began by focusing on our bureaucratic processes, eliminating thousands of pages of regulations and enormous quantities of paper from our acquisition process. We then moved into what we called Better Buying Power 2.0, focused on increasing the professionalism of our workforce and increasing the opportunities for training with industry, training in non-traditional areas across our acquisition workforce. And for the last 2 years, under Better Buying Power 3.0, we've been focused on breaking down barriers associated with innovation across the defense enterprise, with a focus on speed, with a focus on small, agile organizations, on making sure that we have the best and brightest focused on opportunities to put technology into places where it can have an impact on performance for our weapon systems. And I refer you to the website. We've been publishing a ton of material on this process, and we maintain an open collaboration portal looking for ideas continuously about how we can improve our processes, not only in our domestic work, but again in processes like FMS, for example, where we've also been trying to accelerate our system. To deliver capability in a constrained budget environment, I've been increasingly focusing our organizations on prototyping as a way of delivering capability. Rather than counting on inserting technology into full system concepts that are going to be procured at scale, how can we start to put systems into the hands of warfighters so they can understand what future capabilities might offer them? The video that's playing is a few shots of Sea Hunter. This is a 170-ton displacement, 160-foot long, slate gray painted ship that the Secretary christened up in Portland, Oregon, just a few months ago. What's unique about Sea Hunter, of course, is that there are no sailors on board. That is a fully autonomous naval vessel. There is no bridge. There is no life support areas. That is a ship that's capable of a 7,000-mile journey at sea with fully redundant systems and sensor capability that allows it to operate in full compliance with all the rules of the sea, with collision regulations, in close proximity with other manned vessels. The technologies associated with building an unmanned ship could have been tested on a small fishing boat. In fact, of course, we did test them on small fishing boats. But we then carried that capability to non-traditional industry and built a full-scale unmanned trimaran so that we could then take that capability and put it into the hands of warfighters. And today, the Sea Hunter is in San Diego, where it will spend the next 2 years with the U.S. fleet in a series of experiments where we'll try to understand what opportunities an unmanned ship might offer for at-sea replenishment, carrying sensors so we can move assets that might radiate away from the main body of a group, potentially to provide capability for counter-undersea capabilities, or perhaps to serve in dangerous roles like counter-mine operations. This opportunity to build systems at scale, 1, 2, a dozen systems that we can deploy that allow end users to kind of wrap knuckles on the technology and understand that it's real, and also to be able to do what-if experiments, reflects the way that we deliver capability in the commercial sector. In an agile process with a focus on always shipping, to be able to deliver capabilities incrementally, to be able to upgrade them over time, and to be able to engage users directly in feedback loops to ensure we've got the right feature sets that matter to the end customer. it's a different way of thinking about capability delivery than our traditional requirements-based, contract-focused models. But we think that's going to be critical for the future if we're going to accelerate our pace of technological adoption, and that if we're going to be able to focus on innovation as a critical differentiator in an increasingly competitive national security environment. It's concepts like this that I think are enormously exciting, and that I hope that we're fostering more of across our enterprise. For the audience today, I'll just show one other if I have it, and I guess I do not. Just last month in Las Vegas, which is always an interesting place to be, we conducted the DARPA Cyber Challenge, which was an opportunity to demonstrate a new concept for cyber protection. Again, an unmanned concept for the way we might protect systems against network attack. On a stage at a hotel in Nevada, we had 6 supercomputers up on stage, all creatively lit with LED lighting and smoke effects, but no humans involved. And each of those systems was presented with software with known vulnerabilities. Over the course of a day, we provided over 160 what are often called kind of zero-day defects, problems in the software that could be exploited by a potential adversary. These software systems were capable of self-examination. They reviewed their own code continuously, identifying weaknesses in their own code and rewriting their own software on the fly to allow them to patch vulnerabilities before they could be exploited. Today, we protect our systems with armies of system technicians and managers, of cyber specialists who are engaged in assuring our confidence in our systems. In the future, those systems might be able to protect themselves and close their own vulnerabilities before others can exploit them. It's those kind of prototypes that we think are going to help us accelerate and shape a major change in the way we deliver capability to the warfighter. Let me close with while I think we've done an enormous amount in kind of shaping our process for delivering innovation, the thing that keeps me up at night is the demand for talent to be able to execute these processes. Today, as I look at the areas that are most important to the future of the U.S. Department of Defense, in areas like advanced computer software and artificial intelligence, in areas like emerging biotechnology, in areas like advanced materials and advanced computational systems, those are areas for which there's enormous industrial demand. And I certainly feel that we're in a competition for talent globally, and a competition for talent with the commercial sector, and with enormous need to identify and attract those A+ students who can have an outsized impact on shaping our future. And to do those, we need to ensure that those students are available, that they're interested in science, technology, and math. And we are engaging now throughout our entire process from kindergarten, in fact from pre-K today, all the way up through postgraduate work, in helping to create opportunities to attract non-traditional students into the science, technology, engineering, and math fields, to ensure that we have as diverse and as talented a population to draw from, and to ensure that those students are looking at the excitement and opportunities in the national security sector as a place where they might want to spend a portion of their career and help shape a larger opportunity. This all maps back into the way that we recruit, train, and retain our folks. Today we are experimenting with new models. For example, over the last 2 years, we've begun offering new programs for scholarship for service, where we've been recruiting young people out of high school, out of gymnasium, to come study at some of our finest undergraduate institutions, where we are offering them opportunities to come work for us upon graduation. And so today we have dozens of candidates at MIT and Stanford and other top institutions who spend their school periods training and researching in areas of great importance, spend their summers in our laboratories, and upon graduation will join us to play key research roles in our enterprise. And reaching all the way back in that pipeline to help draw folks forward is one of the ways that we're ensuring that some of the best and brightest are engaged with us as early as possible and as long as possible. We're now offering sabbaticals to key officers to allow them to step out of the service temporarily, to start small businesses, to become innovators on their own in sectors outside the defense sector, and then to come back and rejoin us after that experience. We're now offering opportunities to invite folks to come join us to the department for short periods to bring their talents earned in other sectors and to contribute in ways that traditionally they've not been able to do. We have a team now in Silicon Valley on the West Coast, a team in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and a team in Austin, Texas, that are devoted to engaging small, non-traditional companies, venture-funded startups, to engage those folks, to encourage them to think about opportunities in the defense sector, and quite frankly, to try and recruit some of them away to come join us and help us shape our organization. It's interesting being in meetings with the Secretary and this oak conference table in his office, and to see around the table not just folks that look like those of us in the room, but folks wearing hoodies and T-shirts and very non-traditional backgrounds, but who have ideas that can really make a difference. And I think that's the kind of core of the way that we hope to innovate for future national security advantage, is by bringing those ideas into our system and by encouraging them to contribute in any way possible. So again, I appreciate the opportunity to talk to you today about the way that we're thinking back in the United States about defense innovation. It's a comprehensive program that we hope is going to shape the way we deliver capability across the enterprise. And I hope some of what I've shared with you today might inspire some of our conversation to follow. Thanks.
Yes, it's certainly a comprehensive program, but also a very comprehensive presentation, and we thank you very much for that. So without further ado, Admiral Hagren, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much, Mr. Secretary, for a fantastically interesting but also thought-provoking presentation. I have a few pointers here, but I'm going to ad-lib, because when I saw that beautiful ship and the catamaran with the uniform I'm wearing, I immediately thought, wow, I would really like to drive that ship. But then you came to the next sentence, that it's unmanned. So I saw a lot of career opportunities then disappearing for budding naval officers. But if I put myself into my son's thinking, who are mostly in their respective rooms, sitting in front of computers, driving that ship from their room, I think is really the mindset we should have. And I think that's just a small grain of the presentation, but I think was fantastically interesting. Going back to the cooperation between our two nations, I wanted just to start from a Swedish Armed Forces perspective. There is a very clear line in the statement of intent that says ensure relevant capabilities for the future, including research and development in the areas such as underwater warfare, air defense, and cyber. Those are a few areas, but I think also with these types of conversations and meetings we can find new areas of cooperation. There are similar challenges between the US and Sweden, although the countries are both in size and population different, but still the challenges are the same, I would say, but on a smaller scale in our country. We have discussed earlier today on the balance of the here and now and the future capabilities. I think that is very important, and I think this presentation even accentuates that even more, how important it is to look ahead and to think, for me being older, conservatively, but to think innovatively. Cooperation areas are huge. I think for us it's important to identify the cooperation areas that you are putting up here, or that you are working, but for us then to find the ones that give operational effect and to connect it to the rest of the cooperation that we are doing. Specific requirements, I think, are really important for us to be better at being specific and what requirements, what do we want to achieve. And you showed that also in the presentation of having clear aims with the research. And that is something that I will definitely bring back and look if we can do that even better in our organization. Identifying the opportunities and operationalizing them, I think, is a key factor, and being quicker about it. Better buying power is something I'm hugely interested in, and I think something we're all struggling with increasing the rate of procurement, cutting through bureaucracy. I think sometimes Russia might not be the problem, but it's our own bureaucracy that is the biggest problem maybe. But I think that is something that we really need to address. The examples you brought on as one example with autonomous both vehicles but also artificial intelligence. As I have already said, I'm old. I listen to the radio. There was a very interesting program here in Sweden this weekend that was a philosophical discussion on AI. And you move into that area of when you're operating unmanned, but also with this intelligence, how far can it go? Will it replace the human brain and ours with moral and ethical discussion as well? And that is something also that is interesting, but that needs to be considered, legal issues around this. And I would love to discuss more about the unmanned ship connected to the rules of the sea when it's unmanned, but that's another story. I think we also need to use our own strengths and to put them into a more asymmetrical approach. I think you can do that, being even against a stronger opponent. If you find those areas where you can exploit the opponent's weaknesses with the strengths that you have, you might gain from that. But summing up once again, thank you for a fantastic presentation. At the end of the day, it's about creating operational effect, enhancing our security, and also for us establishing a threshold effect as well. But I think we have all the ingredients of having a good constructive discussion, but also I look forward to the next coming days. So thank you very much. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. Well, certainly food for thought. I have a great number of questions myself concerning procurement reform, and also how to integrate this with doctrine, and also how civil-military co-ownership actually works in practice. But let's now open up the floor for a few questions from you who have attended the seminar. Any questions? Comments or reflections? Please introduce yourself.
Yes. Good day. My name is Morten Sundmark. I'm representing the Ministry of Defense and State Secretary Jan Salerstrand. I've been informed on these range of issues that you just presented a couple of months earlier, and obviously we have been thinking in the same strand. Also in the highlight of what the Admiral just mentioned. But just a hypothetical question. If we would try to make these redirection ourselves in Sweden, as you are planning to do here, what obstacles and challenges have you experienced in these quite significant redirection, and how did you get around those obstacles and challenges?
I think that the fundamental challenge of doing anything disruptive, of course, is the challenge of displacing the current practice. And the most critical piece for creating disruptive change is having an imperative that organizes the enterprise around that challenge. I think today, the challenges we see here in Europe, the challenges we see globally for U.S. power projection, I think have crystallized concern around taking advantage of new opportunities to restructure ourselves. So I think that's been the most critical issue. What is the burning platform, if you will, around which we're trying to reorganize? And I think we've taken some initial steps. I think there's certainly more to do. But again, it requires leadership and it requires desire to make often difficult choices.
If I may just build on
Please.
that, Mr. Secretary, I think that just broadly speaking in terms of innovation and disruption, it's really and the underlying question in everything that we're doing here in Sweden in terms of the embassy, in terms of building platforms, thinking through the lens of how do we build platforms of connectivity to really leverage what we're doing here in Sweden in every area, so that if we're doing nothing more and nothing better, but just with everything that we're doing, if we just connect the silos, that we would be a lot more effective, and particularly in today's growing challenges that are global and a zero-sum resources. And that's why I really like what you said, Mr. Secretary, about Secretary Carter saying that we're looking to create holes in silos. And I always say that we don't want to break down the silos. People always talk about breaking them down. I think we need to have verticals, and we need to be excellent in our verticals, more so now than ever, but we need to connect the verticals. So it's really a model, a matrix model, if you will. And if we think of it that way, then we get the best of both worlds. We remain excellent in our verticals, but we also leverage the transposing of different ways of thinking, and that really leads to innovation. And that's a model that I try to think about with everything that we're doing. We just had a cancer research collaboration MOU that was signed between US and Sweden, and had an event, and just simply having people talk to each other and create that connective tissue that you talked about is a model that is helpful. So perhaps the disruption would soften, it would create a softer landing for that disruption that you were talking about. And that's what we're hoping that we can create here in Sweden. How do we connect? How do we build a platform so that networks can be built on top of that platform between our two countries in terms of sharing this innovative content?
And certainly the SOI, I'm wearing this thing. The SOI and in fact, quite frankly, the emerging technologies in the areas of interoperability, in terms of focus on standardization, modularity, which is something we talked about earlier, creates opportunities for those connections to be made in new ways at potentially lower cost and with less friction. And I think that offers new opportunities for collaboration in ways that perhaps we haven't taken advantage of in the past.
We're running short of time, but I think we have the opportunity for one short question.
Yes, thank you. I'm Johan Reder. I'm defense advisor at the Embassy of Sweden in Washington. I'm just wondering if you could expand a bit about your efforts to engage the global partners and the international cooperative partners that you see, and to what extent that is done, or that you wish to do that in a bilateral context or in a multilateral context, and how can we as a global partner connect into this work, use the holes in the silos, if you will?
Yeah, we are certainly taking advantage of both existing multilateral frameworks and strong multilateral engagements where it either makes the most sense. I think that today I look at our industrial collaboration and academic collaboration with Swedish institutions as a great example of the mutual benefit that both countries receive from some of our research and technology exchanges. I think those offer an excellent model for the kind of engagements we can have in the future. We're encouraging our research leaders to get out of their offices and to be engaged with their partners globally, to ensure that we have both awareness of opportunities and the connections that are required to kind of help raise the level of joint effort going on in our research and development laboratories and institutions. So, we are emphasizing that in the way we allocate our budget, in the way we evaluate our programs, in the way we make allocations against our priorities. And so we are really trying to encourage an open search for the best capabilities, for the best opportunities for collaboration, rather than simply looking inside as we've been accused of doing in the past.
Okay, thank you very much. I think we've actually extended our time, but it's an interesting topic, and I'm sure we will discuss it in our Swedish context, and what the United States is doing in this area is, of course, a benchmark. So it was very interesting to have you here, and a big round of applause for Stephen Welby.